In unequal societies like India, economic redistribution is a very common concept. So, what's this fuss about wealth redistribution? And did the Congress even mention it? The whole controversy has two components to it: the Congress's manifesto and a speech made by Mr. Rahul Gandhi in Telangana on April the 6th. Let's talk about the Congress manifesto first. The Congress manifesto has no reference to the word redistribution. The word distribution appears twice, once in the context of center-state relations, which is not relevant, and on the other occasion, and I'm going to read now, it says the Congress will establish an authority to monitor the distribution to the poor of government land and surplus land under the Land Ceiling Acts. This is a fairly routine process where any land that comes under the government can and is redistributed by the government amongst the poor of the nation. So no reference to any form of wealth or asset redistribution in the manifesto. Let's now turn to the speech made by Mr. Rahul Gandhi on April the 6th in the state of Telangana. And here's where you will find something ambiguous that may have led to this controversy. I'm going to read now because there's a lot of content. If you go through the speech made by Mr. Rahul Gandhi, he starts by saying in this particular part of the speech that India has roughly 50% OBC population, 15% SC population, 8% ST population, 15% minority population, and 5% poor population under the general caste category. So these groups make up for 90% of India's population. He then goes on to say that despite being 90% of India's population, these groups have very little say in major Indian institutions. So I'm going to read now. He says that in Indian institutions and big private companies, these people have no representation. For instance, among media owners, big media owners, there's no representation from OBC groups, SC groups, or ST groups. Among owners of top 200 companies in India, there are no OBCs, no SCs, no poor people from the general category, no minorities, no STs. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just telling you what he said. Then he says that Indian government is run by 90 bureaucrats. Of these, 50% come from the OBC group. He then goes on to say that the Indian government is run by 90 bureaucrats, and despite being 50% of the population, only 3 officers from OBC groups are a part of this group. He says the same about SCs and STs. He says that population of STs is 8% in India, but there's just 1 out of 90 officers from the ST group. He says that population of SCs is 15% in India, but of these 90 officers, only 3 belong to the SC group. And then finally, in this section of the speech, he says that if Indian government spends 100 rupees, only decisions worth rupees 6 are decided upon by officers from SC, ST and OBC groups. Mr. Gandhi then says that essentially 90% of Indian population has no representation. Again, that's what he has said. He then moves on and says that if someone is injured, you get an X-ray done. So there's an analogy here. After the X-ray, the doctor takes the right call. So for him, the X-ray in India is a caste census, which he says they've already done in Telangana. And in fact, even in the Congress manifesto, there is a mention of a socio-economic caste census. By the way, this is nothing new. Even in 2011-12, a socio-economic caste census was done. That data is still with the government. Mr. Gandhi continues. He says, once the country's X-ray is out, we will know the ground realities. By ground realities, he means we will know exactly what sort of partnership or what sort of ownership people from SC, ST, OBC, poor general caste households and minorities have in India. Now, this is fairly standard stuff until now. No controversy. The next part of the speech is where things start to get a little confusing. He says we will do a financial and institutional survey and we will know who has India's wealth. Now, this survey has no mention in the Congress's manifesto. We don't know the modalities of such a survey. We have no idea how this survey will be done. So it is indeed ambiguous. However, I must add that censuses, whether it's the population census of 2011 or the socio-economic caste census, has already collected information at the household level on certain durable assets. So for example, it can tell you which household has, say, a car, a motorcycle, a refrigerator, a television, etc. But again, in this particular speech so far, there is no mention of either wealth redistribution or asset redistribution. There is a mention of a financial and institutional survey, which we have no idea about, but nothing about wealth or asset redistribution. Mr. Gandhi then continues. He said, once the X-ray is done, we will do revolutionary work. By revolutionary work, and this is made up of 2 components. He says, you will get whatever your right is. Then he says, media, bureaucracy, institutions. We will ensure you get your representation. So two components. You will get whatever your right is. And second, media, bureaucracy, institutions. We will ensure you get your representation. Let's break this into two pieces. The first one is, we will make sure you get your right. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean wealth redistribution in the sense that money is taken from the rich and given to the poor directly? No clarity there. Does it mean that there'll be new schemes like MGNREGA or Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which essentially rely on the idea that you tax the rich, take the money, and you implement schemes that benefit the poor? If that's the case, it's a fairly standard process. That's how a welfare state functions. That's how India has been functioning for decades now. But again, there is no clarity. So indeed, there is ambiguity as to how this will be done. The second part, he says, we will increase your representation in these institutions. He mentions the media, the bureaucracy, and other institutions. But again, there is no clarity as to how this will be done. Will there be increased reservations? Well, the Congress has already mentioned in its manifesto that they will get rid of the 50% cap of reservations. So if that's what it is, then we already know. So there's definitely ambiguity in some elements of the speech that has been made, which makes it open to interpretation. But one thing is clear. The phrase asset redistribution or wealth redistribution, the way it is being discussed as if somebody will come, take your money and give it to somebody else, that has no mention in the Congress's manifesto. In Mr. Rahul Gandhi's speech, on the other hand, there is no direct mention to these things, but there are several ambiguities. And one way of interpreting those ambiguities could be this draconian form of expropriation from some individuals and transfer to other individuals. But that is one of the several possible interpretations that could be made. So because there are ambiguities, it's open to interpretation. But what has muddied the waters even further for the Congress is that while they were trying to come out of this particular controversy, Mr. Sam Pitroda, who's associated with the Gandhi family and the Congress, made a comment about the idea of discussing the possibility of an inheritance tax. Again, he did not say there should be an inheritance tax in India. He said it's an idea that he likes and that it should be discussed in the Indian context. But this is election season. Every comment will be under the microscope, and Mr. Pitroda's comment became a headline. So this was today's Ballot Ki Baat. Before I leave, today's political test. And the question I have for you is, a former MLA of the Maninagar Assembly constituency is contesting the Lok Sabha election in 2024. Which constituency is he or she contesting from? Do give in your answers. All the details are in the description. I'll be back again with a new topic and a new question. Until then, take care and goodbye.